Hey everybody, it is time once again for another Rahdo Q&A. And hello everybody, I'm about to answer a bunch of questions submitted by folks like you to the email address questions@rahdo.com. And by all means, folks, if anything I talk about or my wife talks about, because she sometimes shows up on these as well, prompts any further questions from you, well, you know what to do. Questions@rahdo.com is the email address. Keep them coming, folks. I want to hear your cues so I can am. And speaking of which, let's get right to it. But, folks, I'm going to talk about several different topics today, and if any of them don't really strike your fancy, don't worry. There are links down in the show notes that let you jump around from question to question so you can listen to just the parts you're interested in. All right, sound good? Then let's go. Matt says, 1. You mentioned you and Dice Tower have both experienced a drop-off in paid supporters. Any theories why? I know you've mentioned your politics have turned some people away, but Dice Tower is non-political. My hypothesis is the COVID stimulus money stopped. People eventually spent down their savings, spending on hobbies and luxury goods and services dropped off. Plus inflation? There's no one thing. It's a lot of stuff. And yeah, sure, you just mentioned a lot of stuff that is definitely true. Because it's not just... like I said, I've dropped like 30% of my funding over the last couple of years. And when I noticed that Dice Tower dropped like 25% on their most recent Kickstarter, the number of people willing to give them money, I'm like, I hate to say it, but misery loves company. I'm like, oh, God, I'm glad it's not just me. I felt bad because, hey, Tom's got an even bigger crew than I do to take care of. And he's got more full-time people, but still. But it's not me. Heck, just the other day, Jamie Stegmaier of Stonemaier Games released, he does yearly... he's not a publicly traded company, but he kind of acts like he is, and he does like shareholder reports and stuff like that, where he, summarizes. And he had a huge drop off. Like this year was like 25% less sales than the previous year. Why? A lot of the reasons you just talked about. People do not have as much disposable income because post-pandemic, the world is going. I would say. To a certain extent, the world is going through an inflation spike, but it's also going through like a correction, at least for the United States. Inflation has been kept artificially low for a long frickin' time. Throughout pretty much all of the aughts. And there's kind of, some of it is just a correction. Things getting to where they probably always should have been, but still being pushed over the top by a worldwide shutdown on shipping and goods manufacturing and all that. It all combined to make a huge spike that makes people say, and even though inflation is coming down now, it's not like we're getting into negative inflation. That's never going to happen. We now have a new normal for costs and prices. And that's why we need UBI. Sorry, don't mean to get political now. But regardless, take all the money from the rich people and give it to everybody. Sorry, that's our inevitable future. We will get there eventually, but it's going to take a while. But yeah, so that's affected. That's not just board game industry. That's not just YouTube media people. That's everybody. But I would say, so that's a thing. And and in my case, there's no choice about it. I mean, I saw the numbers. I knew the exact time. The moment I put on a Black Lives Matter shirt for the first time, you can go and watch. I just plummeted. So many people said, "Go woke, go broke." And I mean, I heard it plenty in the comments too. From aggrieved white people who did not like their worldview questioned. So I know that hit me. I mean, it probably hit Tom a little bit too, because in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement, don't forget, Tom had Eric Lang come on, and they had a good, frank, long discussion about the realities of race in the modern world. And granted, I kind of made it a thing for 2 years, and raised money for all kinds of charities and stuff like that, which again made a lot of people very angry, and they were very vocal about it. I mean, heck, just the other day, I got another comment saying, "Boy, you must really hate white people," because they saw on one of my videos I had raised $2,000 for a charitable organization called Black Girls Code, which is focused primarily on trying to, get more. Young people of color, women, or specifically young girls into coding, into STEM. That's their mission. And this guy thought, "Oh, I hate black people. Or I was a race traitor because of that." I'm still seeing that to this day because, heck, I mean, for 2 years I wore BLM and trans rights shirts and free Palestine shirts. I wore a lot of shirts, and I wore them on a lot of popular games, and a lot of people still stumble across those videos because, hey, this is a really popular game. What is he? Does he hate Jewish people because he's wearing a free Palestine shirt? 2 years ago. Well, screw this guy. I'm still getting hit by that. Tom was smart. He only did it once in one little video that it's unlikely anybody's going to see unless they go looking for it. So yeah, I mean, no, that hurt me. No two ways about it. And Tom didn't get hurt by that. But I mean, okay, sorry, that's as an aside. Your point is certainly a big, big part of it. Everything is hurting as a result of, the post-COVID inflationary bumps. And it's going to take a long time to recover from this. It was a gaping scar. It was a wound across the entire world economy. And wounds don't heal quickly. They just don't. They're healing quicker in America than just about anywhere else in the world, but they still take time. But what you didn't mention, and what I think is a big, big part of it, the insanely huge, meteoric rise of board game media. When Tom and I were doing this 10 years ago, we were competing with each other, and I could probably count on two hands the number of channels there were when we got our start and staked our claim. Nowadays, I can't keep track. I mean, for my weekly recap show, I go out of my way to try to find channels that don't have a lot of an audience, and there's just so many of them. I can't watch them all. And so these days, Tom and I are competing for eyeballs. Again, we used to just compete against each other and Shut Up and Sit Down and Joel Eddy Drive-Thru Review and remember Drakenstrike? We had very few competitors. Now we have hundreds, thousands, literally thousands of board game channels. Oh, another one too. We're also competing with TikTok. I am not on TikTok. I really, really, really should be. I totally should, because audience tastes, or the audience is expanding, and a lot of that new audience has no interest in watching me demo a game for 30 minutes. They want me to tell them in less than 2 minutes whether they should buy the game or not, and they're watching on TikTok. They're not watching on YouTube. So a lot of views are going over there. That used to, hey, me and Tom, we used to be just two of the only games in town, and Rodney and Undead Viking and so, yeah, I think there's just a lot more competition for the growth of board game media has gone significantly faster than the growth of board game players. I believe that to be the case. So that's another element that's contributing to it. Right. But at the same time, that is happening, and but you're still seeing. You're seeing companies go out of business left and right. You're seeing one of the most successful board game publishers of all time report 25% drop in sales volume. So yeah, a lot of it is what you talked about too. Question 2. I rank Bob Ross' Art of Chill in my personal top 20 games. I'm curious, what made you so angry about a game that is based on a TV show called The Joy of Painting and literally has the word chill in its name? You are not alone. Several people wrote, so I'm not going to post all the other ones. Honestly, at this point, I can barely remember. I was so angry about the game. The first thing that just pisses me off about that game is the way the die work. Because I'm reading the rules. Before I even played the game, I'm reading the rules, and it says, okay, here's what the die will do. Everybody rolls the die at the start of their turn. And you know what? The die can give you this really dinky little bonus, or it can give you this little dinky bonus, or there's a 1 in 6 chance that it gives you any bonus you want. Period. Right off the bat, I was already against the game because of the way the die is described. Oh, and then on top of that, but it also might just say, hey, Bob's going to do an event. And I didn't appreciate the time, but then once I started playing, what does it mean if a Bob does an event? That's the worst frickin' thing, because, hey, not only did I get a bonus, but chances are I'm not the first player to get to respond to the way that Bob has just changed the landscape of the game. Everybody else gets to respond to that, in a meaningful way before I do, because it's just, I'm the one who triggered it, but everybody else has time to build up towards it. Unless, of course, the Bob event is just incredibly lucky and it just benefits me and nobody else, or it benefits nobody, or it benefits everybody. The game is so poorly designed. It is literally the worst design because of the way that die works and the insane random swinginess of it. But then that was just the beginning. There were so many things. As a 2-player game, I think it's hot garbage because I talked about this earlier in the video, that a game really needs to give you a lot of interesting choices, all of which are compromises. There are clear choices to make in that game that if you do anything other than that, you're wasting your time and you're going to lose. Specifically, as a two-player game, if you are not, Jen and I found very, very quickly that, wow, we got control of every color there is. And now it's just a race to see who gets lucky with whatever jobs come out. But if we hadn't done that, if we let only one player get all of those, they would totally swamp the other player. The other player would not be able to catch up just going for early points as opposed to an investment in point generating by monopolizing colors. That was another just really garbage design. Not a bad design, not a bad idea for a design at all. But in its implementation, especially, now I don't know, maybe you played Bob Ross Art of Chill as a higher player count game. I haven't played it. I only play as a two-player game, where I found that die system was literally the worst thing I've ever seen in modern board gaming. Period. It's terrible. And then and I don't even remember. There were other things too. There were a lot of things. The specificity of the different events that Bob will do. The fact that sometimes what Bob will do is just, Bob's going to chill. And again, that means, I rolled the die and I didn't get an opportunity for something good. You didn't. Everybody just got nothing happens. So the game basically pauses. It just wastes our time. It's just, there are so many things about that game that are just hot garbage. And I feel terrible saying this. Because I don't want to crap all over Prospero Hall. Since, they're being shut down and everybody's looking for work, and I'm sure they're good people, and I'm sure they're clever, and, I obviously, believe me, you were one of several people who wrote in about what's my problem with Bob Ross. My problem with Bob Ross is Bob Ross himself deserves better than this piece of crap game. Honestly, here's the deal. I would have never touched this game with a 10-foot pole. I could just look at the back of the box. I could watch anybody's video and immediately see the inherent problems with the design of this game and how much it would make me mad. Here's the reason I even had the thing in the first place. We went to the FunCon convention, and they had a flea market, and Jen saw Bob Ross. She was like, this is really out of character for her. She doesn't look through games. She doesn't browse. But she saw, because it's a great cover. It's a phenomenal cover. And she saw that, and it was like $8. She's like, what the heck? I'm gonna be brave, and I'm gonna buy a game. I'm just for fun. I'm gonna surprise my husband. And I'm like, honey pie, we'll give it a try, but this game's gonna be crap. And to be fair, Jen thought it was fine. She would never want to play it again, but she didn't find it actively offensive like I did. But I found it actively offensive just to the core idea of good design, period. And I'm sorry, obviously you really enjoy it, but I can't because I'm a game designer and I found it to be an affront to me. And I'm sorry if you had asked me this 6 months ago, I could have gone into a lot more detail. I might have a few facts wrong here and there. I'm just going from dim memory of the worst gaming experience I ever had in modern board gaming. I'd rather play Monopoly than Bob Ross The Art of Chill. Monopoly is a better designed game. All right, 3. I think you're being too hard on yourself when you consider it a failure if someone doesn't enjoy a game they bought based on your run-through. Do you consider book reviews or movie reviews a failure if someone spends money on those based on the review and ultimately doesn't enjoy them? I think in other forms of entertainment, there's an understanding that you may dislike a product even if you heard good things about it. I don't see board games any differently. Wouldn't you agree that other factors that aren't in your run-through can impact someone's enjoyment, such as who they play with, the player count, and even their mood at the time? That's a fair counterpoint. That's certainly true. Here's the deal. I don't look at it that way. Forget about Roger Ebert or, trying to think of other reviewers of other media. Think of it more as you and your friends. And there's a game you really love. And you tell your friend how much you love that game, and then they go out and they spend $120 and buy that game, and they hate it. How do you feel as a friend who you gave advice to, and they went out and are now kind of bummed that they just burned $120 on something that they don't enjoy, that was a waste of their money? I bet you money that you would feel bad about that. You're like, I'm so sorry. It never even occurred to me that you wouldn't like it. Because I love it so much. You would feel bad. That's why I feel bad. Because I don't I do not put myself behind the wall of, oh, well, I'm just an impartial reviewer. I mean, I think of every single person putting money on the table because I made them think that game. Obviously, they're not my friends, but I still think of them as human beings, and I think about the financial hurt I caused them because they bought a game that it turns out they didn't like because they felt watching my video that they would like it. Now, I can give myself a pass when somebody bases that decision solely on my final thoughts because they really shouldn't. And that's why I feel that if they watch the run through, and anytime I see this, I just saw another thread on Reddit the other day, somebody saying, I forget which game it was, that I bought it because Rahdo made it look really good and it turned out I hated it. And that's why you should never trust reviewers. And I'm like, what I don't understand is how could somebody watch not my final thoughts, but the run through itself and not come away with a really strong understanding of what that game feels like to play? Now, you're right. You bring up very good counterpoints. Well, it's not just the game itself. It is the player count. It is the type of people you play with. It is, their astrological sign, whatever. There's other things that I can't be held accountable for. But I do still feel that anytime somebody says that based on the run through, and that's why anytime I've ever been confronted with this, anytime I ever see somebody on, well, actually, I used to, anytime I would see somebody complaining about how Rahdo misled you, I was like, could you please do me a favor? Go back and look at the video and please point out where I misled you, where I misrepresented this game so that I can be careful not to do it again. Because if I misled you somehow and I represented the game in a way that was actively fooled you or duped you, I don't want that to happen and I would like to do better. Now, inevitably, nobody ever said boo to that. And I mean, they just, and I don't know. I always in the back of my head think that means, oh, they're realizing caveat emptor. They relied on what I said that I liked it and therefore said, oh, because that person likes it and he's an expert, I'll probably like it too. And that's a huge mistake and that's on them. That's not on me. Right? I'll give myself a pass on that. But the reality is I never know. And this used to be a bigger issue because, I talked about this in previous podcasts, many more people watch the run-through than the final thoughts. These days, it's the other way. And honestly, I should react to that. I should respond to that. I should change my messaging. But I'm an old dinosaur, and I'm hesitant to change. But anyway, that's kind of how I end up approaching it. That's why I feel the way I do. Nate E says, I just listened to your latest Q&A where you talked about more people watching your final thoughts than your run-throughs. Oh, hey, I was just talking about that. You were under the impression that everybody's doing this was just using the final thoughts to tell them whether or not to buy the game. I'm one of those people that watches a ton more final thoughts than run-throughs, but not for the reason you think. I have a couple different reasons I listen to final thoughts so much. I'd love to hear what you think about each and how it fits into your understanding of your audience. Do you think I'm an outlier? Does this make you rethink how your videos are being used? So, observation number 1. I use your final thoughts and other people's reviews to pre-screen titles I don't know anything or enough about. If the responses and descriptions are interesting enough, I'll proceed to deeper research that involves your run-throughs and other. Yeah, that's perfectly reasonable. Yeah, basically, you're watching my final thoughts to find out that, oh, it's a game about Vikings and it's a worker placement game. I mean, the reality is you can get that from the run-through itself. I don't know that you get anything more out of the final thoughts for a screening than you would, because I try within the first 5 minutes, within the first 2 minutes of my run-through to be up and running. I don't always, admittedly, but I mean, it's kind of my goal to be up and running. So you almost immediately just, I see what this game is. You've said enough, I automatically know what it is. And I think you get that, personally, I believe you get that from the run-through more than the final thoughts, where I'm talking on a more cerebral, high level. How does this mechanism affect that mechanism and whatnot? Now, you can say, oh, you're pre-screening based on that because you're less of a settings and more of a mechanism. And I guess in that regard, it makes sense. So, okay, fair enough. Next one, observation number 2. I have 2 kids, and I don't have time to watch run-throughs of games I know about, but think are marginally interesting. Here again, your final thoughts help me not miss something I was falsely dismissing. See, here's the thing. I think you do. I think you are missing the heart and soul of the game if you are using my personal subjective opinions about what is good about a game as your primary vetting technique. There are plenty of things I don't talk about because they're not important to me, but they might be hugely important to you. And you will get a much better understanding of those if you watch the run through than you will relying on my final thoughts, where I am myopic. I have my things I care about. So I don't think you're getting the full picture, and you're probably passing on some games that could be your favorite games of all time based on your vetting technique. Because my final thoughts are really not very good for what you're wanting to do, at least in my opinion. Now, I appreciate you disagree because you view them as a valuable resource, and that makes me happy, but still, that's what's in my head as I'm doing these things. That's what I'm thinking about. I mean, to me, the final thoughts are an afterthought. I'd rather not even do them because they're meaningless. Because I'm just one guy who has really, really specific likes and dislikes that I don't think are consistent with the vast majority of gamers out there. I think I've met a few people who are as Care Bearish or more Care Bearish than me. Very few. I think most people can handle a little bit more of the ultra violence more than I can. Most people are a bit quicker to say, it's just a game. I'm not worried about it. But yeah, and then I will just go on and on about it in my final thoughts because it's important to me. But yeah, I mean, heck, you've watched enough of me. I'm sure you've calibrated. You're watching me with a filter. You're understanding that. So I get that. And honestly, if you're a longtime viewer, I'm not as worried about you. I'm worried about the person who, hey, I just heard about this game, Meadow, and I did a search on YouTube, and this silver-haired gentleman is talking about it. I'll listen to hear what he says. That person has no history with me. That person doesn't know about my peccadillos, and yet they're going to treat it as an authoritative final word and decide whether to buy the game or not. And I think that's a mistake, and I think that's the problem. Whereas, if that person didn't watch my final thoughts, but actually watched the run-through itself, instead of watching subjective opinions, they're watching objective demonstrations of gameplay, where I'm working so hard to let the game speak for itself so they can decide for themselves. And that's why it breaks my heart that is becoming less and less valuable in this TikTok age. Alrighty. 3, I often watch final thoughts for games where I've already purchased and played. It helps me see where I agree or disagree. Oh, I do that too. That makes total sense. Also, I'm excited about a game. It's fun to just hear other people be, oh yeah, totally. That's just, yeah, I mean, everybody wants to be in the party. I totally get that. And that's fun. That's, again, but I mean, that's not what I'm worried about. I'm worried about people making bad purchasing decisions because they misunderstood me as a human being and my personal opinions. Lastly, because I watch for games I've already played, I have a fairly good feel for where the Venn diagram of our tastes overlap, so it's sometimes easier for me to get a feel for what's special about the game for your final thoughts. And that I totally get. If you're a hardcore, longtime super fan, you know, oh, that's so Rahdo. Look, he's complaining about this. That's just his bugbear. It's not that big a deal. I totally get that, and that's great. I do end up considering purchasing and therefore watching your run-through. I know when to perk up and listen close because the most interesting mechanisms are XYZ. I want to say that despite relying so heavily on your final thoughts, I've never bought a game based on your suggested enthusiasm that I did not enjoy. Well, that makes my day. Games I've recently purchased and loved after researching on your channel include Rebuilding Seattle, which no one on the channel did a run-through for. Oh, that's a good point. Actually, that's not true. I did do a run-through for it, but it's only for people who sponsor. I mean, if you pay, did I do that one with Jen? So that's at a higher level. That's a relax. I played that with Jen. We played all the way through. So people at the relax level on Patreon or the more Rahdo and Jen on YouTube can actually watch me and Jen play through an entire game. And then what you saw was me doing a summary of it for the monthly roundup. It's interesting too, those summaries, those roundups, because obviously those do just as well as run-throughs, and those are so much easier. I should just stop doing run-throughs completely and just do little 3 to 5 minute blurbs and put them on TikTok, and I'd probably be much more successful. I should. I just can't bring myself to do it. Anyway, sorry, I'm going off track. Games I've reached. Sorry, White Castle and Point City. That's great. I'm really glad, and it sounds like you have a healthy relationship with my final thoughts. So I like to hear that. From Richard in London. Just before the questions, I'd like to continue with a related thought from a recent Q&A. The point being discussed was how you feel bad if you think that you may have pushed a game too hard or reviewed inadequately, such as someone bought a game they didn't enjoy. I think for most of us, game purchases are a very considered purchase most of the time. Personally, I look at most, if not all, of the available reviews both video and text before making a purchase. See, I think you're in the minority there. I think a lot of people are just making gut instinctual, just click the button and it'll show up in a week and it will, oh crap, I didn't like this. I don't think most people are making those very informed decisions. Most people are now watching. That's why TikTok is ascendant. I mean, a TikTok video will get literally 100 times the views of my YouTube run-through video, because people, I believe that is why top 10s are so popular and so ubiquitous, because people just want. I don't have much time. Just tell me as fast as I can. What game should I buy? I don't have time to do the research. Just tell me now. What game should I buy? And I know I am feeding that with my services that do not fit that. And that's why I feel bad about it. But anyway, continuing on. Personally, I look at most, if not all, of the available reviews before video and text to make a purchase, so I imagine there are very few purchases where your review has been the sole influence leading to a totally regrettable purchase. I'm trying to say in a nice way that you're influential, but not that influential. Nobody makes us go out and buy stuff. Sure, that's true. So don't feel guilty and carry on doing what you do. Incidentally, I watch your final thoughts first to see if the game is anywhere in my sphere of interest. If so, then I watch the run through. So, okay, I can respond to that, but it'd be a lot of the same responses I had to the previous one. Let's continue. What I like about your reviews is that you get across how a game makes you feel. That's what I enjoy most about a game. I'm not concerned about winning or losing. I can't be either because I lose most of the time. I want to feel that I've achieved something or solved something or connected with friends or relaxed, etc. Generally, your reviews get that across. Take Snowdonia. You explain that win or lose, at the end of the game, you feel like you've built something. This is true in Snowdonia as one of my favorite games, so thank you for the review. On the other hand, Hallertau, which you enthused greatly about, has dropped out of favor. Our first couple of games were excellent. Loved it. But on the third game, my wife Sarah drew cards that were totally pants. My final score was almost twice hers, and she did not have a good time at all. It's now become a phrase in our household to be Hallertaued, which means to suffer a crushing defeat thanks to some random element of the game. Happened to me in Thebes. We like games that have nail-biting in the close finale. Do we regret Hallertau? Not at all. We had fun with it, and the time will come when we get it out again and try a different deck of cards. So my questions. I like watching top 10s or 100 videos. One reason it helps me identify reviewers with similar tastes. The reviewers that have the greatest crossover are the Brothers Murph. So, when the Brothers Murph look at Clans of Caledonia, I think, hey, we should try that game. However, see, again, this is what I was talking about before. You're looking for shorthand. You don't have time. It's interesting. You started off saying, I do a lot of research. But then in this, you're saying, I'm looking for a shorthand. So, I mean, you're like everybody else. I mean, you have a busy life. There are other things you're worried about day to day. You want to play games. You don't want to make bad decisions. And so you're using the Brothers Murph. And if they like it, chances are I will too. Maybe I should buy it. And that's dangerous. I mean, not dangerous at the end of the day. I mean, this is all hopefully disposable income type stuff. I mean, but board games are expensive and they're getting more expensive all the time. And to be fair, they've always been expensive. People saying, oh my God, board games are so expensive now. They've always been expensive. That's what I used to say at the beginning of my video, going back 8 or 9 years when I first started. These games are expensive. And they're continue to be very expensive. Anyway, I find the top 10s tend to feed my desire to always get a better game. I somehow feel a bit disappointed if I get a new game and it doesn't make my personal top 10. It's like I imagine I can have 30 or 40 top 10 games. It's daft, because I know I have a bunch of really, really great games that keeps me entertained for years. So, do you think top 10s are healthy? Is it good to be pitching games against each other in an attempt to say one is empirically better than the other? Well, there's no choice about it. It is, ever since Dave Letterman, back in the early 80s, discovered the secret sauce that made him a multi-millionaire, if not billionaire, I don't know his net worth, was those top 10s. And then many years later, Tom Vassell stumbled across the same formula, and now everybody does it. Because we are hardwired for blood sport. We want to see things compete against each other. We want to see the inherent drama of, oh my God, I can't believe that thing beat that thing. It's in our lizard brains. There's no two ways about it. Is it healthy? No. Was it healthy for people to shout in favor of blood sport in gladiatorial ancient Rome? No, that wasn't healthy either. But there's no getting around it. That's what our brains want to do. We want to categorize things. We want to classify things. It's one of our secret strengths. It's what makes us a species in a lot of ways. So, is it healthy? No. But is it human? Yes. 2, you've said it's a shame that more cooperative games don't allow you to see the challenges coming. Have you played Thunderbirds? Besides being a major nostalgia trip for me, I think it's one of the very best co-op games out there. You get to see the crises approaching, and you can even deal with them out of order. Yes, I think it's fantastic. For folks who don't know, I did cover it many, many years ago, a prototype of it. from Matt Leacock, and I thought it was brilliant because it combines, it does it, but it does it as a conveyor belt. And I really feel like I need to start looking for conveyor belt games more often. The more I think about it, I think conveyor belts are maybe my favorite game mechanism in all board games. And so turning them in a way to manage crises. If you haven't seen it, definitely check out The Captain is Dead. It does the exact same thing, and it's freaking brilliant there. And it's just absolutely absurd that more games don't do this. Earlier in this podcast, I was starting to list things that, man, if you don't do this, board game developer, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. I'm going to say face up. Preparation for events is another one where, why do you think it's good to just randomly hit people out of the blue? In what other avenue in life other than candid camera is just randomly, assaulting people considered a good thing? And yet board games rely on it as a crutch all the time. Yeah, Thunderbirds was great. It should have gotten a lot more attention. Those planes and the vehicles were really neat too. Troy says, first, love the channel and the podcast. They give me great insight and entertainment. I especially love Rahdo Talks Through podcast as it provides an opportunity for more candid talk with your listeners about board gaming questions. Just a simple question for my first one. My wife and I finally begun playing some of the games that have remained wrapped on our shelf. Not shame, but opportunity. Many of the games, we have larger decks such as Earth, Everdell, Ark Nova. With decks this large, shuffling for that first game takes longer than setting up the board if you want a truly random experience. For us, it requires maybe 8 to 10 separate piles, shuffling each of those piles and then combining them to shuffle more. This is a result of having bad experiences where the first playthrough of the game was not enjoyable because players seemed to get the same types of cards over and over again. Long explanation I ask is there a reason decks do not come pre-shuffled? I imagine the designers, or in the age of AI, could find an optimal pre-shuffled order of cards that would provide the most enjoyable first playthrough. If they can print it grouped by cards, styled, etc., now surely they could print the cards in a way they wanted just by moving images around, no? Are there any games that already do this? I know I have seen a few games that have done this, but you're right, it is incredibly rare. And I do think it's awesome. I think it's a great idea. And the fact that it is such an immediately, obviously, self-evident, great idea, and yet almost nobody does it, means that my answer to you is, it must be hard to do. And I do not work on a board game manufacturing line, so I don't know why. But I do know, I have seen some videos that basically, the cards, they get printed on these huge mass sheets. I forget what, 10 by 12 grid of cards, and then they go through these choppers that chop them all up individual things. And this is me guessing. I have no firsthand knowledge. You'd be much better off talking to, an actual board game publisher who's had to go through this process. But I would be willing to bet if that huge sheet of paper did not have all the events next to all of the resource cards, next to all of the player power cards, had them all grouped up, it would have the potential to introduce so much human error into the process. If that big sheet of cards was like a big hodgepodge of all kinds of cards all over the place, it would probably let through a lot more mistakes. Like, oh crap, that's a 5. It should be a 6. How do I know that? Because it stands out amongst all the other 6s. Suddenly there's a 5 in there. But if that 5 was hidden down in some bottom right corner and all the 6s were scattered all over like multiple pages, that would be my guess as to why it doesn't happen. Because it is a safety metric to group the things together so that as one of those final stages of the production process, the people who know the game best can do one last scan before they push the button and pay tens of thousands of dollars to print out, hundreds of thousands of cards that, we made sure all our ducks were in a row because they were literally in rows that made it easier for them to see. That would be my guess as to why it doesn't happen more often. Oh, and then, folks, that's it. We are now going to move on to Jen's gaming questions. Will be with us, so I'll turn that picture of her back on. Boop. And we'll be back right after this. And that will be the end of this session of the Rahdo Q&A. Thank you, folks, for watching and also for submitting your questions. Send me more to the email address questions@rahdo.com, and I'll get you covered in a future episode. And in the meantime, if you would like to hear some more, you're in luck. I have been doing the Rahdo Talks Through audio podcast for years now with my wife, Jen, and we have got hundreds of hours for you to enjoy. You can hit that big box that's on screen right now if you want to dive deep. Also, you can go on ahead and subscribe so you won't miss the next Rahdo Q&A. And thank you, folks, for watching, for listening. Have a very, very nice day. Talk to you later. So long. Bye-bye.